Steven Wilson, To the Bone. The fifth full-length studio album, solo-wise, from the man. The album as a whole is pretty damn good. Now, the thing is, I kind of gave a couple years ago a bit of a for those who've caught up with me on Facebook. Actually, no, that was when I decided to do the best of set first as my first weird introduction to everyone, I guess, here on YouTube. And that's when I kind of mentioned the Steven Wilson album. I was still getting up on my feet at the time. I could have handled things a little better, maybe, but I don't regret too much on it, so. And I definitely don't necessarily regret that album, though I'm not sure I would have given it as much praise as I did now. Hank Cannot Erase. Because I'm starting to lean more towards the two albums that preceded it, Grace for Drowning and The Raven That Refused to Sing. With this album is definitely more where Steven decides. Most people also know of him from his work with Porcupine Tree. Maybe sometime, if I ever can afford to, I will go through the entire discography of that they have. And, of course, you also know of him for having produced one of Opeth's greatest records, Blackwater Park. There's your fun facts on Steven Wilson in terms of his background. And for now, the album itself, they kind of did leave off from where certain elements of things that Hank Cannot Erase did, and maybe certain ideas that might have been explored even in that were leftover tracks from off of those first two albums, for the past two albums, I mean, onto this record. And it seems certain times some ideas maybe from the 90s era of Porcupine Tree, when they were more closer to Pink Floyd sound in terms of the more psychedelic and space rock elements ish, krautrock rock-ish kind of stuff, as opposed to when they were starting to become more alternative rock oriented. Though then again, you could still count that as 90s, given Stupid Dream was out in 1999, so some of that still kind of lingers in here and there sound wise. But for the most part, a lot of people are saying that this is too poppy, and it's I don't know if it's just Brits and Europeans complaining, but as far as I'm concerned, this album is damn good for what it is. I will not say that I don't personally consider it at the moment better than the last album, yet alone having went through Grace for Drowning and Raven Refused to Sing. However, I will to say that this isn't a darn good album, and definitely quite catchy. And I feel like if this is your first introduction to Steven, it's not a terrible introduction, especially introduction, or at least a way to get them into Steven Wilson and whatever he's done with his music, whether even in the Porcupine Tree or any of his other stuff. And maybe through that means of maybe the last 4 Porcupine Tree albums, you can use that as a gateway to some of his work that he's done producing for Opeth, and then go and so on and so forth. And I do feel this record will do that. This album is different in the sense that it doesn't go conceptually as most prog artists do, as it focuses more on the singer-songwriter perspective, and in turn it kind of comes off more pop-oriented as opposed to being a prog album. It's kind of, I wouldn't even consider this more of a progressive rock album as it is more of a progressive pop album, but not in the sense that I guess some people would consider Alt J's stuff. Anyone who's been into more of that and stuff, I would say have them listen to this, and maybe they have a better understanding of how to be somewhat more poppy, but yet not forget what rock is, which is what a lot of more American-based pop acts seem to forget to do. Michael Jackson knew when to rock out, hence Beat It. I mean, come on, guys. Wake the hell up on that. And of course, a lot of this does bring out a lot more of his 80s, sort of the progressive pop and or neo-prog of the that has been known throughout the 80s post Pink Floyd's The Wall, I would say. And that's definitely a lot more noticeable here, sound-wise, I guess. Though not as much as like Hand Cannot Erase. Definitely had more of a The Wall feel. This one, it seems, kind of maintains some of that while kind of bringing in some of his obvious influences on Dark Side of the Moon, but also some influences in Genesis, or more particularly Peter Gabriel's solo career. Just bands like Depeche Mode, most of those sort of more industrial or droney, post-punk, electronic type stuff. And that does show in this case, and most of this is just a collection of songs. To the Bone is kind of a core fundamental thing, and the intro pretty well sums up what the track is really about. It's just once you get into the song itself, it's a lot more fun. Tracks that, and it mostly gets into a lot of some of his usual affairs of things. Refuge is him dealing with, I think, a certain refugee situations. Kind of like what we kind of had with Syria, I guess, but there was something that they had going on over, I guess, in Great Britain or something, or UK, whatever. Then you have tracks that deal with, like, Pariah and Blank Tapes, that kind of serve as sort of dealing with the relationships. Pariah seeming more... Blank Tapes is more of... How do I put it? It's definitely a little more darker, and it's just kind of dealing with breakups, more specifically. Pariah kind of deals with the relationship, or at least him kind of wanting to go through it, like his character going through a breakup, and the female part done very well by Nanette Tayeb. If I'm saying your last name right, I'm sorry for butchering it, ma'am. Once again, I'm sorry. But one thing you didn't butcher is your vocals, which were nice, especially when they finally hit that high note and bring in that crescendo. And of course, following that up, Same Asylum as Before, which pretty well deals with a more political stance and definitely more relatable. It's not only in his case with the Brexit thing, but in our case with what we've had to deal with our election. So in the sense that every person winds up how every person says they're going to do something different, but by the end of it all, what was the point? Because they wind up once putting us in the same predicament we've already been in before, instead of really doing anything to change anything. Hence saying that of the Same Asylum as Before. And there are tracks where he definitely goes even darker into the mind of even a terrorist and these bombers and stuff, to the extent of songs like People Who Eat Darkness and of course Detonation, which definitely are more on the heavier side of the tracks for obvious reasons. Song of I is definitely another relationship type track that focuses on certain aspects of a relationship. I give it up. Forgive me, there are people here in the background kind of messing up my review here now, but that's okay. And then there's Darkness, Song of the Unborn is definitely a good follow-up track. Permeating is, I think, the most positive sounding, and not one of the many positive sounding songs, but lyrically is actually brings it forward. Whereas compared to a song like Happiness 3, which off of what 4.5 was, which of course that was a leftover track, but still. And Refugee and To the Bone both have great uses of harmonica, which is something that I don't think I've heard Steven do in any of his works, yet alone his solo career. So as far as I'm concerned, that was a nice little thing, especially making up for lacks of nice little guitar solos that were very good and intricate, which Guthrie Govan was really great at when it came to that record, though this time around we got a different guitar player, all that stuff. So From the Unborn is definitely a good closer for this album, given that it definitely focuses on how do I say this? Yes. The Song of the Unborn pretty well is for those unborn children or fetuses. It's not a song about abortion or anything like that. Or against abortion or for it or anything like that. Thank goodness on the latter part. But it's really about those. It's basically a song to kind of try to show them a better, more beautiful sort of world, I guess. But also kind of like trying to tell them how messed up this world is, and just I guess sort of trying to be helpful in a way of like, here's like a message to them as to how to deal with this messed up world that we've brought you into, but try to find a way to bring positive light. There's definitely a lot more, to a degree it tries to at least end itself on a positive note, and overall, compared to most albums where he's more on a sadder, negative note, this one doesn't really do a pull at your heartstrings, though you'd think it would, given the fact that of all the albums, he finally decides to show his own face, as opposed to kind of being a silhouette or being wearing a mask like he did on within his first two albums. So this is definitely meant to be somewhat more personal to a degree, or at least try to show a more open side of himself, while also maybe in turn, or even more open-minded, I guess you would say, because it's definitely far more positive, or I should say more optimistic in tone, as opposed to the usual more pessimistic affair of things, I guess you would say. Though he wouldn't necessarily consider him a pessimist. It's just he has a thing when it comes to darker, more pessimistic type of tendencies. He's more interested in those kind of things. So there's that. And overall, I'm going to just give this album a thumbs up all the way. And yeah, I enjoyed this album, but it's not album of the year. In fact, I'd rather eventually, at some point, I'm going to want to talk to you about that particular album. Or at least give some maybe short thoughts for now, since all I've been able to do is stream it right now, as opposed to having it physically on hand. So I guess I may start, doing something of that nature. Sure, I guess, and I'll start doing that with that one particular album, which I've been kind of already hyping up a bit, if you've been keeping up with me on Facebook. So check for that. Also, Queen's Stone Age and the new La Prose record coming out, having recently listened to Congregation and then kind of researching on previous albums. You could definitely tell from the earlier years they were definitely how this guy would have, wound up related to Ihsahn, or an in-law to Ihsahn. Well, anyway, of Emperor. But anyway, what did you think of this review? What did you think of Steven Wilson's To the Bone? Comment below, let me know. Rock that like button if thrust if you must. And as always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rockin'. Also, check out my Facebook page as well. Also, leave a like and follow me there. And as always, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rockin'. And I'll see you next time. Take care, y'all.